Hi, my name is Kate Bemis, and Dwight, I'm so excited to have you here today to talk to us about fish printing.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I work for the NOAA National Systematics Lab, which is based here in the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institution. And we're really lucky to have Dwight here to do a workshop on Gyotaku fish printing. So could you start, Dwight, by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Dwight Hwang. I've always been an artist ever since I was able to hold a pencil. I just wanted to draw. That's how I wanted to spend my time. At the same time, I had this infatuation with fish. Anything marine life, I was just obsessed with. And while I was in Japan, I used to work in the film industry as a storyboard artist. And I saw Gyotaku prints for the first time in a tackle shop. And I just completely fell in love with them when I first saw them. And because I thought they were beautiful, they were very classical, they looked very Asian, and they were fish. And I thought that, yeah, gosh, I got to learn how to do this. And so I didn't have anybody to teach me formally, but there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of hours on YouTube, and now it's become a full-time job.
Wow.
Yeah.
So had you been a fisherman, or how did you get interested in fishes themselves?
I don't know what was the first thing, but I can tell you that, if I visit another country, the first place I go to is an outdoor seafood market, just to look.
Yeah, you have to see.
I just
have
gotta,
to see
I
what
just gotta
fishes
see
are
it.
there.
Even when I go to a supermarket, that's the first section I go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I get disappointed when I see fillets. Like if I see the whole fish, oh, that's cool. Go to an aquarium, a pet shop. Yeah, it doesn't matter if they're alive or dead. I just love looking at them. Yeah, I can't explain it to anybody really. I don't understand why, but it's just built-in infatuation with them. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I definitely love fishes too. And so at the National Museum of Natural History, we have the largest collection of fishes anywhere in the world. We have more than 6 million fishes here. And we mostly store our fishes either in alcohol, which preserves them for long-term use and study, and or as dry skeletons. But that's not what you're mostly working with. You're mostly working with fresh fishes, is that right?
Yeah, it's usually fresh fish, frozen fish. We figured out ways to print preserved fish as well. Clearly, like a scientist can't grab samples from a fish print, but there's something very fossil-like about these prints.
So the history is, can you talk a little bit about the history? Because that sort of reminds me of what you're saying about the fossilization of what these prints look like.
Right. So the origin story is that in the 1800s, 1837, I think, is the earliest recorded example of a Gyotaku print in Japan. And the story is that there was a samurai lord, and he loved to go fishing. And he would catch fish, bring them back to his court, and have his court calligrapher document the information. And so what the calligrapher did, what they would normally do, is just write down all the details, how big it was, where he caught it, and the name of the fish, things like that. And it wasn't until one day where, instead of writing it down, they took the same calligraphy ink, sumi ink, which is this, by the way, and they brushed it onto the fish directly, and then placed the sheet of paper over it, rubbed it, and they lifted it up, and it was the first fish print. And it was a way of recording something back then, since I assume most people didn't have access to photography. And so that was like the next best thing.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating that it originated as a way to record and capture and describe the fishes that they were catching.
Right.
And in a very scientific way as well, capturing all the detail.
Right. There's stories of also not just fishermen and anglers, but naturalists, where they would go out into the field and print fish, and print leaves, print insects, which is all possible. In the West, we generally call it nature printing. But yeah, it was just all a form of documenting something rather than trying to, I guess, illustrate something, right?
Yeah. So that from that beginning, when did it transition to, becoming more widespread and well known as an art form that so many people admire?
I honestly don't know exactly when, but I tend to think it wasn't too long ago. Because in the beginning, it was generally done by fishermen. And it was somewhere in the middle where artists started picking up on it and started fine-tuning the process, using different mediums, gravitating away from the traditional sumi ink and working with oil paints and acrylic paints,
Okay.
using color. Yeah, but I don't think that was that long ago.
And so you talked about the types of inks that people are using. Can you walk me through the process that you have in terms of what materials you use for your fish printing?
Sure. So the most traditional form is sumi. It's called sumi. Sumi translates as soot. So it's carbon based. It's essentially a really, really fine piece of charcoal.
Okay.
But a lot of crafters in East Asia, once they figure something out, they want to perfect it. And over the years, over many, many years, hundreds of years, they start perfecting that process. So instead of just having a piece of charcoal that you can make from a campfire, they create something that's just incredibly fine. And I mean, there's all different kinds of examples. Some are inexpensive, some are very, very expensive. But it's the same type of ink that you see on East Asian calligraphy scrolls,
Okay.
sumi paintings. This is what I typically use. I've also started working with colored inks, color acrylics, make things a little different.
And you brush that directly onto the fish?
Yes. So the traditional method is called chokusetsu, which means direct. There's an indirect method as well, but the older method is called direct. And you apply the paint, the ink, the pigment directly onto the fish, and then you rub the paper on top, and you lift, and that's what you get. It's essentially the same thing as if you have a child, you have them, they create handprints and footprints.
Yeah, I'm thinking about all those hand handprints.
It's exactly the same thing, same process. And after they're all grown up, you look back on it, and there's memories imbued in it somehow.
So because I study fishes, the part that I am the most interested in is how you choose the fishes that you print. So what makes a good fish for fish printing?
Well, typically something with really large, distinct scales print beautifully. Me personally, my personal opinion is that the more grotesque a fish is, it creates a way cooler print. For example, if you were to have a very clean-looking, normal-looking fish, it just looks normal. But if you have a monkfish, let's say, or an anglerfish, or something with really big teeth, something that looks scary, or something that somebody would say, "Oh, that's ugly," I think those are the coolest prints.
Well, I would have to say that I agree because I'm really interested in fish diversity. So
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that you're printing not just the typical fishes, but lots of interesting and
Yeah.
weird and
Way
unusual
more fun.
ones.
Way more fun.
So speaking of some of your prints, these are some both normal and unusual fishes that you have here. Could you show me some of these prints?
So this one, if you could help me pick up that side. This one is
Wow.
is a spawning pattern pink salmon. The locals will call it humpy because of this. They look like regular salmon when they're in the salt water, when they're in the oceans, but when they start going up the rivers, the males develop this huge, grotesque hump, and I just thought that's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And we printed this in Alaska. My son caught this fly fishing, and he was so proud, and so we decided to print it, and then afterwards we ate it. But yeah.
That's an absolutely beautiful print. And what about the paper that it's printed on?
So the paper, it depends. It's called. The paper. Okay, so Westerners typically call this rice paper, which is a misnomer because there's no rice in it. It's made out of mulberry.
Mulberry. Okay.
And depending on which country you get it from, it's called something different. For example, this, if you buy it in Japan, they'll call it washi, which means Japanese paper.
Okay.
If you buy it in Korea, they'll call it hanji, which is Korean paper. And the same for the Chinese. But it's all the same type of paper.
It's all the same.
Yeah, same materials. So this is a very basic fish print. There's a single fish here on the sheet of paper. Let me show you the next one. I'll put this down over here. Make sure I don't step on it. This one might interest you more, perhaps, because this one is it's called a giant sea bass or a black sea bass. It's a juvenile, but this is considered endangered in California. And we had the opportunity to print one of these juveniles a few years back. But
it's just beautiful. And I see that you've also included some of the environment that this species is found.
Exactly, yeah. So it lives in the kelp forests all along the California and the Mexican coasts. And this is I can't think of the scientific word, but it's called giant kelp, the common name. So yeah, we try to endeavor to create scenes as well, because I think that it's more immersive if we do.
Yeah, well, it seems like such a wonderful opportunity to share the science through the art that you're doing. And looking at this, you can immediately see this fish in its environment, which tells you something about its biology.
Right. And being able to print something that's endangered or rare, it also creates a dialogue with whoever's looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let you put this one back down.
And then those two were black and whites. And we started recently working with color. Here is an octopus.
That's beautiful too.
That we printed in acrylic pigments. Yeah. The hardest thing about printing an octopus is not necessarily its skin, its smooth skin. It's to create tone and gradation so that it looks 3D, and also for it to not look like it's dead, because it's very easy to make this thing look like it's
Yeah, I can imagine
dead.
the way that the tissue is, that it can be challenging to create that realistic, lifelike form.
Yeah.
So where do you get your specimens from, and what kinds of organizations do you collaborate with in order to share fish printing as broadly as possible?
Well, we get a lot of our fish, in fact, almost all of our fish, from either scientists, institutions, or from commercial fishermen themselves. And then some of the really, really rare ones from, the fish collections, like the ones you have here. Yeah. What was the other question?
Yeah, I was mostly just curious where you're getting the fishes from. So the fishes that we're going to use today are ones that in this exercise are ones that came from fisheries surveys. So I work for NOAA, and one of the roles that NOAA has is to contribute to our fisheries management. And so to do that, the best way to know how many fishes we can eat each year is to survey our waters in order to establish how many we can catch and how many we can eat. And so the samples that we'll be using for the workshop are ones that were sampled by the fisheries survey. So they contributed to the data set that allows us to understand how many fishes we can eat each year. And so none of the fishes were killed specifically for the activity that we're going to do with them today.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to sample the diversity and study where these fishes are living, and what they're feeding on, and how they're related to each other. So.
Right. And once you have people actually touch them, work with them, create a document of them, there's something very intimate, something very lasting about that.
Yeah.
You can create a relationship with your subject this way too.
Well, what else would you like to tell us about fish printing?
It can be really accessible. There's not a whole lot of material that you need. I mean, for example, my art travel kit is really small, really light.
Yeah.
I take it all around the world with me, just in case. There's always something to print.
I love that.
It's a lot of fun this way, and you know, it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, it can be if you choose to, but it doesn't have to be. And so it's really accessible. You really get into it very quickly, and it's very mobile.
So anybody can do Gyotaku at home.
Anybody can do it.
That's wonderful that it's such an accessible, both science and art.
Yeah, it really is.
So I'm really curious what your favorite thing is that you've ever printed.
Oh, it's got to be that football fish. Yeah, there's an anglerfish, a really rare one. It made the news when it came up.
I remember seeing it on the news.
Yeah, I had friends in Australia reaching out like, "Have you seen this? You got to print this thing." It's like, I would if I knew where it was. And one of the directors at NOAA, a good friend of mine, I talked to her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna locate this thing for you. I'll help you out." And she found out that it was headed to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles to be preserved. And so she called over there or contacted them and said, "You know, we know the football fish is headed your way, and you're going to preserve it. But before that, let this guy print it." And they agreed.
And it worked?
Yeah, they agreed. And so we set a date for it, and it was great. Apparently, there's only been 30 or 31 of that known species to ever have been collected. And like, we're looking at one, and we're about to, you know, touch it and work with it. And just that experience alone was amazing. And then actually touching it, like it's very strange. You guys really got to like look up a photo of this thing. It's a bizarre fish.
They're so weird looking.
They're so weird. They're cute and demonic at the same time. But it's gelatinous. It's like dipping your hands in a bowl of Jell-O, covered in cactus spines. It's really weird. And you asked me before, you know, earlier, like,
yeah, what makes a good fish? That certainly sounds.
Yeah, it
like
had none of those
here.
qualities. It was really very strange and alien to me. And so once we figured out how we were going to approach it, all of a sudden, then we were like surrounded by scientists, and understandably, it's such a rare specimen. You know, no one wants to get it damaged or marred or anything, me included. And so that added pressure was not only like, it's really stressful, but it was really memorable at the same time. We built a lot of fun friendships that day. By far my favorite.
Yeah. No, that sounds like an absolutely wonderful story, and it's such a great. I think it's a really fun story to me because there are, in our fish collection here, we have so many fishes that are that rare. Where, you know, we're talking about ones that are known from less than 30 individuals, and those are species that there's just still so much to discover about. And I think anything we can do to share that more broadly is really important. That there's still species where we don't know anything about their biology, and museum collections are one of the places where you can go and see them, and they, you know, serve as a voucher for these specimens and species.
Mm-hmm. Open those doors up. I'd love to print it.
Excellent. I can't wait. So I think would you be willing to walk us through the whole process of fish printing? We can do a fish print now.
That's why I'm here.
All right, let's do it.
Hi, so we're gonna print a fish now. This is a black sea bass, a local fish brought in by NOAA. And it's a beautiful fish, really lovely fins, really cool looking tail. Love this hump it has up here on its head. So we're gonna see how this prints. So the first thing we're gonna do is I have the ink already prepared here on the side. And you don't wanna rush this, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that the ink, this particular ink, it dries very, very quickly. So you don't wanna take too much time either. So I'm gonna brush ink onto the top, onto the fins. I'm gonna hold each fin like this and brush on. It'll get my hands inky, but I'm doing this to avoid getting the ink onto the surface, because whatever's on the surface, that's gonna transfer to the paper too. So I hold up all these fins open like this with my hand, brush ink on them. And then I'm going to use, it's a very rudimentary tool. You can make out of pretty much anything. These are made out of cotton, but in Japanese it's called tampo, and basically a dauber. And so with these, I am going to blend the ink after I've applied it with a brush. And here we go. And again, this ink dries really quickly. And so all the ink that you see on my hands doesn't worry me at all, because all I need to do is give it some friction, rub my hands, and they're dry enough to hold the paper. And now I'm blending. This part, it's very similar to makeup. If you think of makeup, you apply it, and then you are blending it, removing it, adding more as you see fit. So just keep in mind, whatever you have on the fish, that's what is going to transfer over to the paper. So if it's light in one area, it's going to turn out light. If it's dark, or if there's a lot of ink, you're going to have a lot of ink on the paper. It's very simple. Okay. The best landmark on a fish is its eye. So the first thing that I like to print is the eye. And then once you figure out where the eye is, you can start creating the image of the rest of the fish. If you've ever done finger painting before, it's a lot like finger painting, because wherever you touch, that is what is going to appear. Now, if you're printing alone, which you can, you just need to take extra steps in fixing the fish into a singular position with pins or string or clay. if you have someone to help you, like me, you don't have to. And before you lay your paper down, it's a good idea to really get familiar with your fish. Like run your hands over the fish, have your fingers and your hands really memorize what the fish looks like, because once you put the paper over, you're not going to be able to see it anymore. Okay. So what I'm doing under the paper is I am putting my hands, my fingers, underneath the fin, pressing up against the fin, and then pressing down onto the paper to get those areas, to get those fins to print. Now, it's very hands-on, but if you prefer, you can always pin them into like foam board or something, and do it that way. But I like being really hands-on like this, because if I decide to like change something, change the pose, I can. When you're ready to lift the paper up, you don't have to lift up the whole thing. You can check as you go and make sure you get everything. Ready, you can lift it up and you'll get a print of your fish.